You're listening to the podcast, Clean Comedy Chats with your host, Drew Davis. It's gonna be awesome and will change your life forever. You're welcome. You're welcome.
Welcome back to the Clean Comedy Chats. We're back. We took a month off, took a month to recover and do some more interviews. And here we are, first Saturday in August. Thank you all so much for tuning in. If this is your first time with the Clean Comedy Chats, I'll give you a brief rundown. This is a podcast where every week I interview a different comedian who's part of the Clean Comedy Collective, which is a virtual network of comedians that started about 2 or 3 years ago. And now we have about 250 comedians from about 39 different states. And every week I like to find a new one and talk to them and get to know them. I'm very excited about our guest today. We have Rabbi Bob. How are you doing, Rabbi Bob? Or is it just Bob?
There's a story behind that. I prefer just Bob because Alan King was a great comedian. He used to do a bit years and years ago about his son's bar mitzvah. And I remember he said, we had to hire a tutor. So he drives up in his Corvette, gets out with his Bermuda shorts and sneakers and says, "Hi, I'm Rabbi Chuck." So, that rubs me the wrong way. So I don't like Rabbi Bob. I don't like Rabbi Mindy. I don't like it's Bob. If they're kids, like in my old congregation, they'd call me Rabbi Alper. But adults, I would say, call me Bob.
Bob, just Bob. I like that. I'm going to just call you Bob then. I like
good.
that. I can kind of relate to that because so we talked about this before we started the podcast. I have a ministry background, and so of course, like Baptist churches, they usually call them like pastor or reverend or whatever. But I did non-denominational and Methodist churches, and every now and again you'd have kids that would come from a Baptist background, and they would be like Pastor Drew, and I'm like, oof, that sounds no thing, just Drew. That's okay for me. So, and before we get into the interview, just want to remind everyone, check out our website, cleancomedycollective.com. You can see previous episodes. You can check out the comedians in our network. So Bob here, you can check him out in the Vermont section. And we have all kinds of other things. There's a place where you can see what our upcoming shows are, and you can just learn more about the Clean Comedy Collective. And if you're a comedian who's interested in being part of the collective, there's a form there. There's a whole application process. And we'd love for you to sign up and send us an application. That being said, enough about the promotion stuff. Let's get into talking about Rabbi Bob. So here's a brief bio.
About
Bob, just Bob. We're gonna get a bio in about just Bob. There you go. I don't even think I need to add the just, but I like that. I think that'd be a fun staging. Just Bob. Next to stage, just Bob. So Bob Alper is an ordained and practicing rabbi and a comedian based out of Vermont who has been performing for 38 years nationally and internationally. He runs a second enlightening program called The Spirituality of Laughter and has been featured on the Tamron Hall Show, Good Morning America, CNN, and The Today Show. He has been featured on SiriusXM for the past 20 years. So we're going to get into all this and more. Bob, I think my first question is, do you still do, well, I mean, obviously you still do comedy, but are you still also a rabbi as well? Are you currently doing both at the same time?
It took me a lot of years to come up with an answer to that. And I finally was able to articulate it. First of all, number one, yes, I'll always be a rabbi. And I love being a rabbi. Secondly, once in a while, I do life cycle events. I did a funeral a couple of weeks ago, but very rarely. But the third issue is, I realize there are all kinds of ways of being a rabbi. There's congregational life, organizational life, the chaplaincy, scholarship. My rabbinate, my way of being a rabbi, is making people laugh.
Love that.
And I feel that's as much of a calling as any other part of being a rabbi. I love doing life cycle events. I love teaching. I love conducting. So I love all the parts, most of the parts. I didn't like the politics, but most of the parts of being a rabbi were very satisfying. If I told you I love doing funerals, it sounds strange. When you think about it, a funeral is a time when you can enter people's lives, and if you're skilled, you can make a difference, and in a very short time. And so I found it to be very satisfying doing funerals. and I use humor in funerals too, which I'll get to later if you don't. But anyway,
Yeah.
back to being so all kinds of ways of being a rabbi, and I found that making people laugh is my rabbinate. And the best example, there are tons and tons of examples, but the best example is um, after I did a show years ago, a woman who I knew was dying of cancer came up to me. She said, for an hour and a half, I forgot I was sick.
Oh my
And
gosh.
what higher calling can there be than to help a person who is suffering and dying, not remembering that she's sick for an hour and a half?
Yeah.
And so that's
What
that's that's more than making me. That's my rabbit. That's a calling.
Yeah, what a testament to like what we do in stand-up comedy, that the healing power of connection and laughing and at times distraction and just how getting them off, that's you still have to go home to it, but right now you can just enjoy and be refreshed. And I love that.
Yeah.
So,
The another example. I've written a couple of books, and I'm happy to plug them. They're wonderful
sure.
books, short chapters, about 35 in each book. And one of the chapters is called Joe and Justine, about a guy who was, when I was in Philadelphia getting into comedy in 1986, 87, I found a list of comedy writers all over the country. And there were two in Philadelphia. I called one. His name was Joe Medeiros. He was a ad agency guy, copywriter, but he used to go on his third floor of his house and write jokes and try and sell them to comedians. And he had some success. So I said, "You want to try with me?" He said, "Yeah." So we had lunch, and I said, "Okay, can you give me some jokes about having teenagers?" And next day, he faxed me 10 jokes, two of which were pretty decent. And the next time I did a guest set at a comedy club, I tried them. And if one of them worked, I would pay him $10. To make a really long story short, Joe Medeiros ended up being, for 18 years, the head writer of The Tonight Show.
Oh wow. Yeah.
And the reason was, well, he wanted to get to Jay Leno. Leno was in Philadelphia. A
Mhm.
woman whom I had married was the guest relations coordinator of the Valley Forge Music Fair. I called her. She said, "Have Joe drop his jokes off, and I'll put them in Jay's dressing room." And at midnight that night, phone rings. "Hello, Joe. Hi, Jay Leno. Really like your stuff." So, so, so Joe is the head writer of the Tonight Show. The point I'm getting to is, I went out there a few times, and I went to the show, of course. And after the show, we went out for dinner. And then he had to go back to the studio to edit a piece that Jay had filmed that day, playing a muscle-bound garbage man who invited the women of the neighborhood into the back of his truck for cocktails. Hysterical. I mean,
Yeah.
so I'm sitting in a high stool behind Joe and the editor, and they're working hard. They're tweaking. They're raising the volume. They're cutting this second off. Your editing is not an easy task, but
No.
that's what they're doing. And I was thinking, that's their work, and they probably are not thinking what I am, which is that when this airs tomorrow night, a teenage girl is going to be out past curfew. She's going to come home. Her father's up angry watching The Tonight Show. She walks in and he's ready to let her have it. And then they look at the TV and there's Jay Leno in this muscle shirt inviting women for cocktails in the back of his garbage truck. And they watch together and they laugh together. And then slightly mellowed, the father says, "Sweetie, I get so nervous when you're out beyond." And she says, "Dad, I'm so sorry." And I won't. And it's and in another place, in a hospital room, there's a man who's dying, and he's got his TV on low so it doesn't bother his roommate. And he's thinking about the fact that he's mortal. It's the end. He's in pain, and then he sees Jay Leno, and he forgets that he's sick for a little bit.
Yeah.
So what Jay did, what the editor was not just work. That was, if you pardon the expression, holy business.
Absolutely.
They were ministering to people. They didn't know it, but that's how humor works. And I say this in my book, that this is an amazing thing, that and it's reframing what we do as comedians. If our comedy is not hurtful, if it's
Mhm.
appropriate humor, and that's what we do. And
Love that. Yeah, and I like the interjection of if our comedy is not hurtful. I think that's very important. I mean, comedian, we can say whatever we want when we make jokes, but there's definitely a maturity of can and should you say something, right? Like you can say it absolutely, but what's it really doing? Is it really worth, is the juice worth the squeeze? And I've said many times on this podcast, I do steer mostly with clean comedy, but I didn't ever set out to just be a clean comedian. I just learned a while back I don't have a face for crass comedy. If I say something dirty, women are like uncomfortable. They're like, "Ooh, no, thank you." But one thing that I've always that's been important to me as a comedian is I don't want people to feel less than because of the joke that I say. So
Exactly.
it's less important. I mean, like I do work mostly clean because that's my personality, but like it's less important to me whether it's a crass or dark joke, but I don't want it to be an offensive joke. It's
I,
that's
I've given an example in my career. Early in my career, I used to do a joke about how almost every wedding at which I officiated, the processional was the song from Fiddler on the Roof. And I would be kind of amused to see a 225-pound bride walk down the aisle to, "Is this the little girl I carried?" And it was a funny joke. It got a good response. I had a manager at the time. She was a heavy-set woman. And she called me one day. She said, "Bob, I talked to the chair of the event that you're doing in Lancaster on Sunday." And she asked if you're going to do the joke about, is this little girl I carried? And I knew immediately that this is a woman with a weight issue. And that Sunday, I didn't do that joke.
yeah.
And I've never, ever done that joke since then. And when I transferred from a cassette of my act to a CD of my act, I took that joke out. There's no reason, if it hurts somebody, even one per, there's no reason to keep it in. Of course,
Absolutely.
I have plenty of other material.
Good comedians don't need to rely on those jokes once you
Yeah,
realize, even if it's one like, oh, that's my best joke, or a good comedian will write another best joke,
right.
like so that's, because that happens sometimes is people are like, I know this joke isn't great, but it gets such a big laugh, so I'm going to say it anyway. And it's like, you don't
It's
have
hard.
to,
It's hard
so.
to get rid of it.
So you've been doing comedy for 38 years, which is, if I'm just being honest, my entire life. You started comedy and I was born. That is,
What a
I think,
coincidence.
right, yeah, maybe it's connected. I don't even know. I feel like the longer you do comedy, just in general, the greater comedy is. Like you kind of get past some of the stuff you need to get past, and just the longer you do it, the deeper the love you have for it, the more understanding. We were talking about before the podcast, the less things bother you. It's just doing comedy for 38 years, I would love to hear kind of like what are some of the biggest differences you see between now and maybe when you first started or in the middle of your career? Because I feel like there's a bunch of different times then, or like what are some of the things that you feel like are this is always true, this has always been the case. That's.
I really haven't seen much difference. I don't do clubs except, guest sets to try out material. So, fortunately, I've been very lucky. Almost all the shows I do, they're coming to see Bob Alper. And that's a big difference.
Awesome. Yeah.
I mean, Seinfeld says when they know who you are, you get 5 minutes of grace. Then you have to be funny, but you get the 5 minutes and you bring them in. So I don't have to prove myself. It's also, I don't have to do, clubs where somebody might be drunk or people talking or other distractions, which are horrible. Although I think clubs are better about this than they were back then, and they're more careful. But I mean, the club where I sort of got my comedy chops had a guy named Pete who was big, and Pete would take care of things, so we didn't have to worry performing at that club. And I never had hecklers. But anyway, but my audiences are similar most of the places where I go. Although I've done, you know, a lot of shows. The Jewish audiences are similar; they skew older. Um, but I did one show. I remember in Saratoga Springs. I looked down in the front row. There's a mother, a grandmother, and a 13-year-old, and the mother was laughing. The 13-year-old was slapping his knees, and the grandmother's wiping her eyes with. And I said, "Wow, I got all."
That's so cool. Yeah.
Yeah. But
And
yeah,
what a cool family experience. A lot. I mean, I love it's doing the clean shows, sometimes you do shows where it's like the whole family can come and you've created this bonding experience a lot. Just oftentimes, at other shows, it's like, we want to leave the kids home, which is cool. Maybe you need a night out, but like it
Yeah,
is cool to have something where like everyone can be there together. And I've heard this from the parents that come to it, and it's like great to be able to laugh at a joke and not be self-conscious because your kid's sitting there,
yeah, yeah.
So, and because otherwise you have to be the responsible,
Right.
parent or whatever. So,
In my publicity, I say people should put um, adults and children 11 and older are invited. Anybody younger than that, you're dead because it's. And Steve Martin says the enemy of comedy is distraction,
mm,
and that's what happened. I had one show in Fort Myers, Florida, at a synagogue, and some people brought a baby. I wasn't smart enough to say no. I won't perform if there's a baby in the room. I let it, and then the baby started, doing what a baby does. And finally, I said, "Could you please take the baby out?" Okay, so they took the baby out, and then after the show, the wife of the rabbi came and said, "Oh, you don't know those people are. They're leaders of the congregation, and they were married here." And I want to say, "Oh, good. Was the baby conceived on the pulpit?" You know.
yeah,
So I said, "I don't care. Not
yeah.
who they are. If they're rude enough to bring a baby to a comedy show, they shouldn't be there." And but that doesn't happen too often.
No, not super often, but good for you because I mean, I haven't worked at churches there are the people that they treat like royalty, but it's like they're humans too. And, you helped it be a better experience for everyone. And it's good for them to hear, like, oh, you
Yeah.
maybe like, take the baby out, come back, later. I'm less nervous about or less self-conscious about when there's babies than when there's like kids that are old enough that if like you say something they might turn to their mom or dad. I'm like, what's that mean, and stuff like
Right.
that. So
I,
but
I did a show in outside of San Francisco, in Burlingame, California, and the young rabbi and his wife, they just had a baby, but they sat in the front, and the exit was right out, and they were both there with the baby, and then the mother got up with the baby, and she went out, and then she came back, and then he went out, and I'm looking every time they did that, I'm looking, everyone's eyes shifted to the left,
absolutely they look and
and
they
I said,
notice it.
this joke is not going to work. This joke is not going to work. And they were trying to be quiet and discreet. And
Mhm.
no, it was, anyway.
Yeah. And also like for the parents, that can't have been a fun evening out. Like
No.
you both were trading playing hot potato with your baby,
Yeah.
like is um so you've done comedy also, so you've done it nationally here, but you've also done it internationally. So I'm wondering too, because I haven't done comedy internationally yet. That's on my bucket list.
Yeah.
And I've always been intrigued by it because I feel like you have to learn pretty quickly when you're on stage, like what stuff translates to different countries and what
Right.
stuff others. And have you only ever performed in like English speaking countries, or did you perform more like you had a translator and or so? Yeah, tell me about
I,
international comedy.
the only place with translator was in San Juan. And I said, I got twice the laughs. I would do a punchline and they'd laugh, and then I'd hear patata, 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 and they'd laugh again. The people, the Spanish speakers would laugh when they heard. So I got twice the laughs, but it
Yeah,
was a little
that's
difficult.
awesome. That's
In
fun.
England, um, I would I did theaters in England and synagogues in England, um, and before I do much, I'd run my lines by some people. Like I have reference to Harrison Ford, and I'd say, and everyone knows Harrison Ford,
Hmm.
but I wanted to make sure that everyone knew
Right.
Harrison Ford. I'll tell you the joke, by the way.
Yeah, please do.
I start out with this. I say, I'm 81, and it's not that bad. My hero's Harrison Ford, who just turned 84. He's making another movie. It's going to be called Indiana Jones and the Enlarged Prostate. So, but if they don't know, so I would do that, or references to maybe a movie, or a product. I'd run it by, and most people know everything, and didn't have to worry about it. I'm hoping to perform in Dhaka, Bangladesh.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
that'd be
I,
cool.
I have a friend who's going to be with him this weekend. He's the retired CEO of IBM in Bangladesh, now trying to make his career as a comedian in America.
All
But
right. Well, good
and
for him. He's got the at least he's got the money cushion background. That's sometimes that's hardest part about being me. How do I pay for my next
oh
meal
yeah,
and pursue my dream? But
I think he's okay. And in Dhaka, Bangladesh, the first and maybe still only comedy club is called Naveed's Comedy Club. This guy's first. He's Naveed. He founded the first comedy club,
started his own comedy club.
and he says, if you're in Bangladesh, you have to perform. And I think I'll be okay because I tried my material out on him, and anyone who comes to the show would speak English. So I've done, and in Israel, I've done shows in Israel. I did a bunch of shows alone, a bunch of shows with an Arab comedian together, the two of us. And again, a couple things wouldn't work because too esoteric, or like Vermont. People don't really know about Vermont, and so I cut the Vermont jokes or just preface.
Right. Tell me about the Second Enlightening program and the spirituality of laughter. I know we've talked a little bit about this, but your official program, and feel free to talk about any of the books that you wrote, or just because that sounds like
Yeah,
a really awesome and detailed thing.
yeah. Well, I do. It's a lecture on the spirituality of laughter, where I basically expand on what I mentioned. My rabbit is making people laugh. The importance of humor, the value of humor. I talk about humor in the Bible, humor in the Talmud. I mean, believe it or not, for example, I would talk about how I always use humor in my congregational life. I would begin sermons with a joke. One sermon I remember years ago, I said, this is for Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year. I said, for the past 2 weeks, my wife and son have been in Peru on vacation. I stayed home to write sermons and prepare for the high holidays. You're welcome. So, boom, But
Yeah.
there was a teacher in the Talmud 2,000 years ago named Rabbah, and it says he would begin his lessons with a joke because it would relax his students. And then they were able to take in the series. So not every sermon starts with a joke, but every sermon starts with something that's going to bring people in, that's going to get their attention. I mean, I read my colleagues, and the first line of their sermons is, it says in Exodus chapter 7, verses 14, shut up.
Yeah.
You know,
Nobody cares yet.
Yeah. So all of my sermons begin with and so I explain in this spirituality of laughter how it's an ancient technique, and I talk about the humor of Jews, of Muslims, of Christians in biblical stories. The Book of Esther is hysterical. People don't realize it's a very funny book.
It has to be funny, or it is incredibly weird.
Yeah, I mean, they don't really. There's a scene with Queen Esther, Haman, the bad guy, is chasing her around the room. She falls on a couch. She falls on top of her. Her husband comes in. You're trying to make a conquest of my wife in my own house. This kind of stuff. It's a ribald comedy. And I give an example of modern humor. This is from a 1950s Israeli joke book. The town was being bombed, and an older couple was running to the shelter. The husband turned around and started going back to the apartment. Wife said, "Where are you going?" He says, "To get my dentures." She said, "What do you think they're dropping? Sandwiches?"
Love that.
So, I use those jokes, those examples. Even during the Holocaust, there was humor, a different kind of humor. A woman who I became very close to, named Gerda Klein, who died a couple of years ago, but she was a survivor. And she told us in the place where they slept, which she couldn't call it a bedroom, it was a barracks. Horrible, horrible. She was a slave laborer for 5 years. The teenage girls, would write plays in which they would mock their captors, and that little humor, it wasn't laugh out loud stuff, but the humor helped them during that time.
Help them get through what they were having to go through. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, in situations like that, I feel like that's when dark comedy shines, when it's a terrible situation and someone has the skill to find the funny in it. And yeah, it's weird to someone who doesn't know the situation. They're like, wow, that's a weird thing to say, but it
Yeah.
is very healing. So,
There's a book called "It Kept Us Alive: Humor During the Holocaust." It didn't keep up. I mean, 6 million died, but among the survivors, they found that humor was, when they could use it, was helpful.
Yeah.
Uh,
What is like your favorite moment as a comedian that you've experienced? Like, what's just something that stands out as like a special memory, a really cool moment? Just maybe it's like the best show, best an experience afterwards, or just in general, like favorite moment as a comedian.
has to go back to the Montreal Comedy Festival. I did. They had what they called the Bar Mitzvah show. It was the 13th year of the festival, and Andy Nolman, who was the CEO, um, he had a vacation house in Vermont, and he picked up a newspaper, and they had an article about me. I mean, it's just
That's so
serendipity.
cool.
And
Yeah.
that's how they invited me to be part of and so I was part of a 5 comic show called the Bar Mitzvah Show. And also on the bill was a guy named Malzy Lawrence, who was on Catskills on Broadway. Um, Forget the other two. Susie Essman from Curb Your Enthusiasm. She was on the bill.
That's cool.
Um, and that was so heady. I mean, walking around the Montreal Comedy Festival with a badge that read performer. Huh. And the
So
show, the
special.
audience, that was I've had a lot of shows that I felt really good about, and things that have happened that I felt really good about. I was just thinking the other day, Mo Amer and Susan Sparks, who's an American Baptist minister, and I did the Laugh and Peace tour a lot, and we did one at the Clinton Presidential Library, and the registration was so much they couldn't accommodate everyone, so they had to move to a larger venue, which they
Oh
filled.
yeah.
So we did this
What a great
wonderful
yeah,
show.
what a good problem to have. Yeah.
Uh, and but the best part was after the show, we found a nearby restaurant. And the three of us walked in, and everyone started applauding because they had all come from the show. Oh,
That's so
yeah.
cool.
And they were
What a
so
moment.
appreciative. Um, there were many moments like that. Not only watching uh, a moment, Georgia Tech. I was working with a guy named Azar Usman, who's of Indian background, Muslim, and before the show, we were backstage, and the president of the Muslim Student Association and the president of Hillel, the Jewish Student Association, I overheard them talking about what restaurant they should go to after the show. And then I talked to them, and they said, before they began working on the Laugh and Peace tour, bring us in, even though their offices were next door to one another, they'd never spoken to one another.
Oh,
And now they're going out for dinner and hanging out. And
yeah.
that's what humor, non-political humor. I don't know if it would happen now, given the way things are, but back
Right.
then it worked wonderfully. I hope we can revive it someday.
And I
Uh,
think things like humor help bring us together. It
yeah,
builds bridges. Like, I mean, sometimes, I mean, there's a way to do comedy that's more divisive than inclusive, but I feel like I love that about a comedy show is you start out with a group of strangers, and but then by the end of it, you've shared experience has brought everyone together a little bit.
I,
And
I use the line, when people laugh together, they can't hate each other. Can't do
that's
it.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But yeah, I think it's always important as comedians to just identify a lot of the cool things that we get to experience, the cool things that we get to do, the cool things that we get to see. For me, it's as simple sometimes as um, I I perform a little spot on a show and then I get to watch the rest of the show for free.
Yeah.
Everyone else in the room had to pay for a ticket.
Right.
And because I did a guest spot, they were like, no, you can stay. And like, so I'm seeing these people that people pay good money to see, and it's just like, and I'm talking to them afterwards, and it's all very casual. And it's just like stuff like that. Like, and there's so many good, fun, amazing things that come with comedy. So, that being said, there's also a lot of hard things. Sometimes it's very toxic. Sometimes it's very draining. Sometimes, so it's very important to always hold on to like the good
Yeah.
stuff that we get to experience. Now, I know we talked about this before the podcast about how like a lot of our audience here with Clean Comedy Chats are newer comedians or people looking to get into comedy. So, what would be a piece of advice you'd give to new comedians today? Just what if you could only give them one piece? There's probably a lot you could say, but
Um, it's to be really obnoxious in the supermarket, meaning meaning
I'm
Meaning,
so glad you're giving us meaning, not just
yeah,
like, and
yeah,
that's it.
yeah, I'll explain that. What it goes back to is try out your jokes every chance you get. And if it's in the supermarket and you see a person that you sort of know or even don't know, but try out your jokes. Don't expect you're going to get a huge guffaw because you're going to one-on-one, but
Yeah.
try out your jokes because it gives you the opportunity to get the pattern, to memorize the joke, uh, to cut syllables, to edit and edit and edit and edit,
Mhm.
but to say the joke as much as possible is the way you to refine everything. And then,
Yeah.
of course, try them out. And when you try them out, don't let one failure stop you because it may be the delivery. It probably is because it's the first time with a new comedian to go over and first of all write your jokes out if possible. I don't write mine, but that's a good idea if you can do that. And the way I do comedy is I'll do an hour and 10 minutes, and every single solitary word is pre-planned.
Mm.
And I make it look like I'm just thinking this stuff up. But every word, and I can remember probably 15 years ago, I did a joke. The punchline is his grandparents had returned from gambling in Las Vegas. And then no, his, his had returned from a gambling junket in Las Vegas. Okay. And then after doing the joke for 10 years, I realized the word junket is not necessary. Just returned from gambling in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
And that idea occurred to me while I was performing. And I was so happy at the end of the night, I got rid of two syllables.
Yeah.
I got rid of,
It's a big moment. And the
yeah,
longer you do it, the longer you have those. It's super special when it's like an
yeah,
old joke and
yeah,
you've learned how to tell it better, you know?
yeah. And so for a new comedian, that's what they have to do. And there should be a mantra that goes through the head of every new comedian. I'm not Robin Williams. I'm not Robin Williams. I can't just pick up and make people laugh.
Mhm.
I'm not Robin.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the key. Just practice, 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 and every chance you get, um, you know,
And it does feel like you're working on a muscle. I mean, it's true that for some people, stand up and performing and maybe even joke writing is a more of a natural thing than for others. But I feel like, for me, I've always felt like the performing part comes naturally to me, but the joke writing has been a bit of, that's where I have to put the work in and I've had to learn the skill. But I
yeah,
feel like it's easier now than when I first started. I feel like I've stretched that muscle and I have a system that kind of works for me. And I just think the more you do, like you said, the more you do it, the easier it gets.
yeah,
But when you start, you have to actually go through the motions of doing it.
yeah. And
But
and if you're starting out, know you're going to fail. You know,
and that's
it,
okay.
it it's perfectly normal. It's natural. You're gonna go right down the toilet. You're gonna feel
Mhm.
terrible, but that's normal. You're gonna fail, but and keep it up though. Keep trying.
Yeah. So then here's a vulnerable question for you. In 38 years of doing stand-up comedy, if there's one thing you could have done differently, knowing what you know now, what would it be and why?
Martha's Vineyard, probably 25 years ago. A woman in our town uh, called me. Her brother was getting married on Martha's Vineyard at his home, and the thing they forgot to do was get a rabbi. They had 300 guests set up. They didn't find it, and I didn't have a
It's like an
congregation.
important thing to have for
Yeah,
the wedding.
so could I do it? And I said, yeah. So he sent his plane here to pick me up and his sister, and we flew to Martha's Vineyard. And this is a guy who's when the Clintons would vacation, they would stay with him on Martha's
Oh,
Vineyard.
yeah.
Okay? Um, I walked into the house, and there's two men with their babies, the second marriage for both of them. One was the CEO of Universal Pictures, and the other was the playwright whose name I forget, but major characters.
Hmm.
So I did the wedding. I did a great job. After the wedding, I sat down and chatted with Carly Simon for 15 minutes. Um, then we all sat down. They said, "Where would you like to sit? Would you like to sit with the family?" I said, "No, I'd like to sit with Alan Dershowitz." So I sat with Alan Dershowitz and his wife at their table. And then the groom said, "Could you do a little comedy?" I said, "Of course." I mean, here, 300 people with, I mean, Senator Dodd was there, Senator Kerry was there. I mean, really major. Carly Simon was there, you know. So they introduced me after a few, and I'm following Senator Kerry, who does this gorgeous poetry and Irish, wonderful. And I get up there and I start doing
Oh,
comedy, and the noise level rises until you can barely hear me. And they want their food, and I'm boring them. And I finally said, and I just want to say congratulations to Dick and Eva, and I got off. And I was just mortified. And I had to stay there. And I did such a great wedding and then got up there. I don't think people thought it was as bad as I thought it was, but I was
right.
mortified because I tried to do something and it fell totally flat. So that was the that was the worst.
So in hindsight, you could have been like, I'm good. We don't,
Yeah,
we can just, let's just get to
yeah.
that reception and food. Last question for me, and then we'll do the ask a comedian section. But I always like to, have kind of a fun or getting to know you as a person versus you as a comedian and performer question. So, when you're not, comedying and when you're not rabbiting and when you're not being a theologian and just doing all the cool, awesome things you're doing, what's fun? What's Bob do when he has a day off?
I like to travel. My wife and I just got back from Germany, and we travel. We like to go to New York and do the New York stuff and theater, concerts, and just being in New York. We have
Mhm.
a nice apartment that just like to relax there. So and being in Vermont, just being here is powerfully um, meaningful. I don't need distraction because all I need to do is look out the window and all I see is mountains. There's mountains
Cool.
surrounding. Our house is located where we can't see any other houses, and it's so quiet here. One time when our dog was still alive, we went into the field across the meadow, across the road. We're on a dirt road about a mile up from the main road, and we walked into the field, and I realized I couldn't hear anything. Not wind, not animals, not automobiles, not neighbor, nothing. And talk about peace. And so
I
we
love
we
it.
laugh that up. We constantly are saying to each other how lucky we are to live in this most beautiful state.
Mhm.
And there are things to do around here. I mean, we a couple of nights ago we went to a concert. We live in a town with, I mean, we're all by ourselves, but 12 minutes from here is a town called Manchester. And Manchester has 40 restaurants, two supermarkets, two music festivals, an art center. I mean, tremendous amount of stuff goes on there because it's a tourist destination. But
Yeah.
I drive 12 miles through this gorgeous valley, and I'm home to this most peaceful place. And you know, I mentioned Gerda Klein, the Holocaust survivor. One of the things she taught me was during a 3.5 month death march of 2,000 Jewish teenage girls, of whom 120 survived. They would be walking and they would see a house by the side of the road with smoke coming out of the chimney and lights on. And that's all they wanted. Just to have a home. And Gerda, when she teaches, and she taught a lot, says, especially to teenagers, when you get home, stop for a minute and look at your house. Think of what it means, the security, the peace, the food, the warmth, and really what a
Yeah.
blessing it is. So
That was
I guess
absolutely beautiful. I love these stories that you've been sharing, by the way. I do not know yet. We're in the haven't edited the episode yet, so I don't know if everything you've talked about will be in the episode that everyone can get access to. But I always like to let people know, like, this is a good episode, and if there's probably more content on our Patreon, and so this would be a good episode to check out where you have to pay a little bit to get the full thing.
there's a
But
there's a I love my books. One is called Life Doesn't Get Any Better Than This: The Holiness of Little Daily Dramas. They're available on Amazon and Kindle. The other is called Thanks I Needed That: and other stories of the spirit. Um, there's, we were talking about weddings. There's a wedding story in one of my books about how when I would officiate at weddings, I wanted to be aesthetically pleasing. And I was very concerned about all the parts of the wedding, one of which was photographers who could be obnoxious.
Yeah.
And so I would meet with the photographers before the ceremony. I said, look, I don't want you to do any flash photography during the ceremony. And I'll make an announcement so that the guests don't do either.
Mhm.
It's not fair for you if they're all taking pictures. I said, you can do anything you want as they process in, as they go out, and you can take an available light shot from the rear. And they were fine with that. They
Mhm.
were my friends, these guys.
Yeah.
But sometimes I would come to a wedding and the photographer would be running late and whatever. I didn't have time to talk to him or her. But I would begin the ceremony anyway by saying, in order to preserve the solemnity of these moments, I would ask that no further pictures be taken until the conclusion of the ceremony. It's very clear. I was doing a ceremony, and 2 minutes in, flash. And I look, and there's the photographer about 3 rows back on the side taking a picture. So I stopped and I said, please, no further pictures during the ceremony. 3 minutes later, from the other side, flash. Really pissed me off. I didn't show it, but I said, would one of the ushers please escort the photographer from the room? Because I was pissed.
Yeah.
When the ceremony was over, the father of the bride congratulated me. He said, thank you for doing that. This guy was really obnoxious. He was upset that he didn't listen to me. He was obnoxious.
Mhm.
And other people thought that I had done the right thing. And I thought I
Yeah.
thought,
You were
and
confident you did the right thing too. Yeah.
yeah, I did the right thing. And then it was time for me to leave. I never stayed for the reception. The last thing I want to do is sit at a table and yell over the band at people I'll never see again in my life. So
That's
I
fair.
would congratulate them, maybe have a drink and leave. So I was leaving, and there was one exit of this wedding hall, and sitting next to the door was the photographer with his case open, fiddling with his equipment. And he looked up at me, and I looked at him, and neither of us wanted to see each other. And there's no way I could avoid it. And I had to keep on going. So he
Mhm.
took a look at me, and then he turned his head to the side. And that was the first time that I saw he was wearing a hearing aid.
Oh man.
And then he turned his head to the other side, and I saw he was wearing 2 hearing aids. And then I left. And I end the story by saying, I never saw him again, but I wish I could have seen him again. And I wish I could have looked at him face to face, close enough so he could hear me or maybe read my lips and look at him and say, I'm sorry. And that's the end of the
Yeah.
story.
Yeah. That's a hard part about life is sometimes stuff like that happens and we don't get the opportunity as a
Yes.
sorry or apologetic as we might be. We don't get the opportunity to express that to people.
Anyway, so let
Yeah,
me let
that's
me
cool.
let me let me do something. You can put pictures on your website, maybe
Uh,
like book covers and stuff like that.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so I want to show you my driver's license,
Okay.
which I'll send you a picture. You can put that on the website as well.
That face, that's what a pose.
So this is my real license. This is a piece of gold because as I going back to the first question, my rabbit is making people laugh. This is one of my weapons. This driver's license with this crazy picture. Um, and everyone says they let you do that. And so on the back, this is what it says.
Ah, they let you do it. Yep. And that's legit your driver's license.
Yes, yes. The last time I took it out was going through customs in Switzerland on the way home. And the dour Swiss border guard, was looking at my passport. And she said, all right, have a nice trip. I said, I want to show you my driver's license. Well, so we don't need to look at your driver's license. I said, no, I'd like to show you my driver's license. It's all right. This dour lady, I showed her my license and she cracked up. And she asked if she could show it to the guard in the next booth, which she
Oh,
did.
that's fun. She
And then
shared her joy.
she took out her cell phone. She said, may I take a picture? Which she did. So again, making people laugh. and this is my best weapon.
Yeah.
But and in fact, my second book is called Thanks, I Needed That, and the title comes from when I was checking into a hotel late at night, and the desk clerk had a dour look, and I showed him my driver's license, and he smiled, didn't laugh. He said, "I've had a really rough day." He said, "Thanks, I needed that." And so the name of my book is Thanks, I
Yeah.
Needed.
I love that. And for our audio listeners, you got to check out the YouTube to get to see the picture of on Bob's driver's license of his face. That because you might that might have been missed on you if you're just listening to us, but it's worth checking out the YouTube video. So.
Right.
All right, Bob, we're gonna play Ask a Comedian. And we're just gonna do one question, but just so everyone knows, first of all, thank you everyone who's listening to us and been part of this episode and here with us in whatever means that you're finding this podcast. The way this activity goes is everyone on Earth can send me questions that I put together on a list, and then the comedians I have on the podcast help me pick random questions to ask him in each episode. So you can send me a question. You can send it to my Facebook. You can send it in Threads, Instagram. I've had people email me questions before. I suppose you could find me on the side of the road somewhere and ask me the question, and I'll pull my phone out and I'll add it to the notes app. But we periodically reach out and ask for questions. And if you have one right now that you'd love to see on a future episode, there's actually an option on the notes section of wherever you're listening to us where you could say you could send us mail and you can send us a question that we'll ask the comedian for upcoming episodes. And if you're watching us on YouTube, just drop a comment. We'll get it that way too. So Bob, the way it works is I have a list of questions here. Let me double check. I believe I have 31, but let me check. Yep, I got 31 questions. So you give me a number between 1 and 31, and that will dictate the question I will ask. Some of them are comedy related, some of them are just weird. So I have no idea what we're
Eight,
getting into. Which one?
18.
18. All right. This one comes from Dan Robbins on Facebook. And it says, um, Case, how old were you when you realized you were funny due to childhood trauma?
What was the last part of the question?
So how old were you when you realized you were funny
Yeah.
due to childhood trauma? I don't know. There's lots to
Well,
unpack with that question.
yeah, I can answer the first. I didn't have I mean, childhood trauma. It's two separate parts. I knew I can remember when realized I was funny, and I'll answer that, and then I'll do the second part. The second part of the question. I was always funny when I was a little kid growing up in Providence. The word we used to use for our rear end was not butt or fanny. We called it a tutu, which might have
Okay.
been just our neighborhood term, or maybe our family term. We called it a tutu. And I can remember I was little, a babysitter came. She said, "Does anyone want to go to the park?" One kid said, "I want to go." My sister said, "I want to go too." And I can remember saying, "I want to go too."
Hmm.
And I use this in my act, and I say to the audience, you may not think that's so hysterical, but I remember thinking at that very moment, I am one funny toddler.
Yeah, that killed at
So
the time, I'm sure.
that's the tutu. In terms of family trauma, in high school, I did a lot of comedy in a Jewish youth group. I did comedy I was editor of the high school paper and put out an April Fool's edition. One of the five other kids who worked on it with me was a girl named Robin Green, who wanted to become one of the lead writers of The Sopranos. She did very well.
That's
But
awesome.
so I was doing comedy in Jewish youth groups. I was making funny stuff at the same time that my sister was in a psychiatric hospital and 15 years old and pregnant. So there's plenty of trauma, plenty of sadness, and my father kept losing his jobs, and money was always a terrible issue. So there's a lot of bad stuff going on, and humor was my way, and it was effective because humor was the flip side. Humor. I got elected to office in organizations. I got elected editor-in-chief of the high school paper because I did a humor column that worked out well. And and the girls pay attention to funny guys. So all in all, humor was,
That's what everyone keeps saying. I haven't seen that to be true.
yeah, they like the funny guys.
Yeah. Well, Bob, thank you so much for being on this episode with me.
Sure.
This is your time to plug whatever you'd like to plug to our listeners. Tell them
Sure.
where they can find you. Tell them what they can do. Just tell us whatever you want to tell us.
Well, the best thing is my website, which is bobalper.com. It's BOBALPER.com. People always confuse. They think it's Alpert. There's a trumpet player named Herb Alpert. And my father always just say, our name used to be Alpert, but we dropped the T at a party in Boston.
Okay. I like that.
So it's bobalper.com. And in there, not only is there my performance schedule and comments by people like Norman Lear of the New York Times and all that stuff, but also there's video. You can click that and get video. And on YouTube, there's about, I don't know, I think almost 100 things on YouTube. I just found out one of my Instagram things hit 60,000 plays.
All right,
So
good job.
that's doing well. So I'm Instagram, YouTube, I think TikTok. I don't know. I don't keep track of this stuff. I got a guy in Bangladesh who does all that stuff.
Okay, cool. So,
But that's bobalper.com is the website. And it's also, if people want to contact me, if they want to bring me to their community and perform, that's what I do. And that's what I love doing. So check that out.
that's wonderful. And we have it in our notes section of the podcast. So if you just want to go there, you can click on his website and all of your dreams will come true after that.
Okay.
And then, of course, this is the Clean Comedy Chats podcast. We have a website, cleancomedycollective.com. You can go there. You can hear earlier episodes. You can check out our comedians from all across the nation, whatever state you're in. Check it out. See if maybe you'll discover your new favorite comedian who's local to you. We also have where we post what kind of upcoming shows we have across the country. So if you're looking for a clean comedy show, we might have one near you. I'm in the Tennessee area. I know we produce at least 3 or 4 shows a month here in Middle Tennessee. So if you're around there, come check out one of our shows. And that's about it for this episode. Thank you guys so much. We're happy to be back. It's August. We're going to be hitting episodes every week again. And so feel free to come back and chat with us next week. I've been Drew and you've been great.